Hello, my name is Hannah. I'm part of the Mosaic system. We are really excited to have the opportunity to talk with you guys today and to share some of our story. I will be the one talking today. There will be others kind of participating and relaying to me what they want to add to what I'm saying, but I'll be the only one speaking. If I pause, it's because I'm listening to some of the internal dialogue, so bear with me with that. As far as a trigger warning, we won't be talking about our past trauma in any kind of detail. I may reference it briefly to give context when appropriate, but we are not going to be focusing on the reason we have DID. Our focus is really on what it was like to get diagnosed and moving towards acceptance and kind of our journey once diagnosed is what we'll be talking about today. We may also talk about just kind of vaguely the suicidal ideation that we've experienced and have struggled with. Again, no details about attempts or anything like that, but just kind of a vague, we were struggling with this at this time. And also vaguely referencing some tragic deaths and losses of people that were close to us. So if those things are triggering, this may not be the video for you. But again, no details, that's not why we're here. I also just want to share that we've never talked publicly in any way about our experience or our DID, so this is very new for us, but we feel like it's important to kind of share our story and hopefully to give some people some hope. So we're going to talk about how we've moved from kind of the initial shock and then denial and shame to get to a place where we're more accepting of ourselves and where we're at in our journey. So when everybody has a different idea of where we should start, before getting diagnosed, if we back up about a year and a half before we got diagnosed, I guess, things were going pretty well for us. We were married, we had a son, things were pretty good. There was nothing, no active abuse happening at that time, nothing traumatic. Life was just pretty good. We, at that time, did not remember a lot of the childhood trauma that we had faced. We were just kind of living a fairly seemingly normal life. And then we experienced a tragic loss of a child who was not ours, but was living with us, that we loved as if he was our own, and he died very young, before his first birthday. So after he died, everything kind of fell apart for us. We started having some PTSD symptoms around his death. A lot of intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, nightmares of exactly what had happened. And then that started to shift a little bit, and instead of like dreaming about what actually happened, we dreamed about these kind of creative ways where we had intentionally hurt him, which did not happen. But then we started having these other dreams of trauma that had happened in our past, and once we started dreaming about it, some of the memories we remember happening, and some we didn't, and it was a really chaotic time for us. We got really suicidal for a while, and at the time our husband, who wasn't physically with us because he was in the military, but he connected us with a military family life counselor to try to get us some support, and we started meeting with him, and we started to share the things that we were dreaming about, the things that we remembered, very, very slowly, giving him just a little tiny piece and seeing what he did with it. We didn't really trust anybody at that time. Everything just felt overwhelming and out of control, and we weren't sure how to deal with any of it. But we knew we needed help, and we tried to share as much as we could with him, and he was really patient and had the flexibility to kind of spend a lot of time, like large chunks of time at one time with us, to give us the space to kind of work up the courage to share about these memories and he just did a lot of patient listening and validating how hard what we remembered must have been for us. We had to be hospitalized several times. The suicidality was just so intense that we couldn't always stay safe, and we needed more help. So we're familiar with the inpatient experience and how hard that is, but we just wanted, the suicidality was so intense all day long. It's like suffocating, and it all felt just hopeless, and there was times where we just didn't know why we were even trying anymore. So we would go inpatient for a little while until things calmed down a bit. Finally, we were sent inpatient at Shepherd Pratt in Baltimore, Maryland, and that's where we were finally diagnosed. And we were really scared at the time when we first got diagnosed. While we were at Shepherd Pratt, there were many people on the unit who had this diagnosis, and of course they're in crisis, but the way they presented was very different than the way we present, and of course we were also in crisis at the time, so we had a lot of anxiety going on, and the way they presented was kind of scary for us. So we had a really hard time accepting that, like, we were all in the same boat and had the same diagnosis. But when we exited from Shepherd Pratt, they connected us with a DID specialist about an hour from our home, and we started seeing her for a while. She ended up passing away in an apartment fire, so our work ended with her really abruptly, and that was hard. And then around the same time, the counselor that we had been seeing switched jobs, and we could no longer see him. So we had no therapist, nobody that we felt like we could really talk to about what we were experiencing. And we ended up going into a really deep denial. We don't have DID, they were wrong, and it's just, like complex PTSD that felt safer and easier to deal with. And we went about our life. We had a second child, we ended up getting divorced and leaving an unhealthy relationship there. But we really kind of put our head down and tried to focus on proving that we weren't crazy, that we weren't worthless. We had this deep, deep belief that, core belief that we are completely worthless, and that the way that people had treated us in the past was justified because that's what we deserve. And we spent a lot of energy trying to prove that wrong, to prove to the world, to ourselves, that we are worth something. So we went back to school, we finished our bachelor's degree in psychology, and then we got a job working in the field, just an entry-level job that we did for about a year. And in the middle of that year, we started really struggling again. The suicidality spiked up, and it got to be too much to manage. So we decided we really need to find another therapist. So we called around to some, we went and visited some, and had just one session with many, many therapists, and just knew in that one session that they were not the right person for us. We didn't feel safe with them. We were starting to lose hope, and felt like nobody could handle all of the trauma that we were bringing to the table. We actually had two different therapists who, once we gave them kind of the Cliff Note version of our past trauma, were like, I'm pretty new to this field, and that feels like more than I can handle, which really just hurt and made us feel like we were too much for anybody to work with. So we ended up going online and looking for a therapist in our area who had a doctorate, with this belief that if they have a doctorate, then they're more experienced and they'll be able to handle it. And we found one, and we sent him an email that was really like, here's the deal, we've been looking for a while, this is what we keep being told, starting to lose hope. We don't know if you have availability, but if you do and you're willing to meet and like think you can handle significant trauma, we'd love to meet you. And he emailed back, and he was open to meeting and seeing how it felt. So we did that, and within the first 5 minutes of being in his office, we felt safe, and we knew he was the right match for us. This was almost 6.5 years ago now, and we're still working with him. So he's definitely is the right match. After about 3 weeks of us working together, he could tell that we needed more support, and so we went to twice a week, and we continue to this day to see him twice a week. So a lot of therapy support. After that first year of that entry-level job, we switched and started doing some crisis work, which we really enjoyed. And then we also enrolled in grad school and wanted to, well, we enrolled in grad school because we felt like we needed to earn more money if we were going to be a single parent and make it on our own. So we enrolled in grad school and we were working full-time, going to school full-time. We were a single mom full-time. It was a lot. We got pretty burnt out. We had to be hospitalized at the beginning of our second year of grad school for a little while. But we came back out. We had to take a semester off from school, but then we got right back to it, and we graduated in spring of 2018 with our MSW. And I can remember very vividly the second we graduated. Like, we went to Simmons University in Boston, and the graduation was in Boston, obviously, and then we were there for the weekend afterwards. And I can remember like going shopping with my family and acting like I was okay, and then when they were otherwise occupied, I was messaging with my therapist and just ready to be done. I was very suicidal. It felt like I had had this goal for so long to graduate, and now that that was done, that box was checked, I was ready to be done. And it was a really tough time. You know, a time when you accomplish something so great and you should be able to enjoy it, but it just had kind of the opposite effect, and we had some really intense suicidality to manage. We were experiencing at this time a lot of intense emotional, waves of emotions that we didn't know where they were coming from. It would, like, you know, could just be driving and all of a sudden like this intense sadness and we're crying, and like it's so intense, like we can't breathe. We were also having a lot of like body memories, so we'd feel this pain in various parts of our body and not know where it was coming from. It was all really confusing and frustrating. We felt totally helpless, like didn't know how to manage these things, didn't know why they were happening. Some of the memories that we would get flashes of were things we didn't remember happening, so it was just a really confusing time, and we needed to figure out a way to navigate and cope with it. So shortly after graduating from grad school, we, in therapy, decided to take a second look and to be more open to this idea that maybe we have DID, and that's why things felt so chaotic and out of control. And as we started to explore that and to be open to that idea, we became more aware of the different voices we could hear inside. I mean, everybody has kind of that stream of consciousness happening in their heads, but ours, there was more of it, and there was different voices, and they were very distinct and separate from each other, and there was like patterns in the way that they would respond to things, and started to come to really know them. And it was hard at first because there was so much of the noise happening once I was starting to pay attention to it, that it would be hard to kind of sort it out and express what was happening. So for example, we'd be sitting in therapy and, you know, twice a week, session after session, trying to get words out, but we just couldn't. Like, there was so much happening. It was like 8 people trying to fit through one door and just nobody can get out. It was really tough. Things just felt hopeless. It felt like, okay, I think I do have DID, and if I agree with this diagnosis, that felt like some kind of a sentence that we were going to live a life where we couldn't function, we couldn't hold a job, like we were going to just struggle like this forever, like, you know, not being able to talk or express what was going on for us, it all feeling overwhelming and chaotic and out of control. But we kept trying. We kept showing up to therapy twice a week, started to get to know each other internally better and better, worked on creating a system for communication so that we could better understand what everybody wanted, what was bothering them, what triggered them, trying to approach each part of our system like they were somebody on the outside, because it's easier for us to show compassion for somebody who's in pain outside, and trying to generalize that to the internal world and practice that instead of just always being frustrated that it was so noisy inside, or that there was always somebody seemingly upset about something. We started holding meetings internally to try to get everybody on the same page and give people space to express themselves. And as we got to know each other better, as I got to know them better, and to understand what memories they were holding and what roles they had played, especially when we were younger and all the trauma was happening, I started to feel gratitude and appreciation for them. Started to understand that if they hadn't been there, we probably wouldn't have survived. Like, it was too much for one person to deal with. But even though I felt that kind of appreciation and could recognize that, there was still so much shame. I felt like broken and weak. And I hated, honestly, I hated that I needed to have all these internal altars just so that I could cope with my life. It made me feel like I was too weak to do it on my own, and I lived in this overwhelming shame, and I hid the diagnosis. I didn't share it with anybody in my life outside of therapy, because it was embarrassing. I just felt embarrassed and ashamed of it, and I didn't know how to talk about it. And I was so sure that if people found out, it would change the way they thought about me, the way they felt about me, that I would lose friends, and that people would think I was crazy. So we end up getting a job working for a nonprofit. We still work there, running some housing programs for homeless youth, and now we supervise a program for youth aging out of foster care. But in the work setting, we worked really hard to hide our DID. We did not want anybody to know. We truly believed that if people found out, they would think that we could not do our job and that we might lose our job. So we just lived in so much shame and worked hard to keep it hidden. But over the last year specifically, things have shifted. We've had some really powerful experiences in therapy, and it's shifted the way we think about our DID. We've come to find it really quite amazing that the mind can adapt in this way to find a way to help protect us and help us get through these impossible situations. The appreciation I feel for having this internal system to help when things are really hard has grown, and it makes me want to know them better, to want to understand them, to help them figure out what makes them feel safe, and then to really try to get them what they need to feel safe. Excuse me. We've also worked on trusting external people. We worked from a framework for a long time where nobody was truly safe, and that if we got to know somebody, if we knew them for long enough and gave them the opportunity, that they would hurt us in some way. And if we shared about our past, they would use it to hurt us, to take advantage of us. Even like with our therapist, I think the first 4 years we worked with him, part of us was always waiting for him to hurt us. And that started to shift, and we, through that therapeutic relationship, learned and started to believe that some people are actually safe, and that you really can trust them, and they are not going to hurt you intentionally. Because everybody's human, and they're going to say something that hurts, or they're going to go on vacation, and that's going to be hard, those kinds of things, but they're not going to intentionally hurt you. And being able to trust that, and then to start looking at the other people in our lives, because we've worked really hard to surround ourselves with safe people, people that genuinely care about us and won't hurt us. And started leaning into that and learning to trust people. Also started to learn to trust people internally. I used to fight so hard, kind of as the host of our system, to always stay fronting, to never let anybody else front, because I was so scared that they would do something or say something that would ruin things, would ruin relationships, would cause our therapist to terminate with us, would cost us our job, whatever it was. I just didn't trust them. But over time, in getting to know them, I started to trust them and to seek out times when it was okay for others to front. And when I can feel the pull that somebody wants to front, if it's appropriate, I'm able to just kind of step back and make space so that they can front. And I just trust that they're not gonna ruin anything, that it's okay. It's really kind of liberating to not always have to fight that, but to find times where it's okay for others to front, and for me to step back. At some point, maybe 9 months ago, we came across the System Speak podcast and quickly got addicted to it, listening to it all the time. We do a lot of driving for our job, so we would listen to it in the car all the time, and many of the alters could relate to different alters in their system, and kind of had their favorites and would get close and excited when a particular alter was sharing on the podcast. And through listening, we developed this kind of deep understanding that we're not alone, that there's other people struggling the same ways that we are. I mean, we knew that, but to listen to this podcast, this episode after episode after episode, and be able to kind of hear our story in some way in the words being spoken, obviously we're different, but there was so many things that we could relate to, and there was so much relief in being able to relate to somebody in that way. We also started reading books written by people with DID about their experiences, and just it was amazing to feel like you're understood and heard, and that you're just not alone. Like, that's so powerful. And at the same time, we were reading a lot of Brene Brown's work, listening to her talks. We love her, and this idea of being vulnerable with people that you trust, and instead of hiding all the time. And that really started to cause us to want to share more openly with people we trust, for them to really see us. And so we finally worked up the courage to share with a couple people in our lives. A close cousin and a good friend of ours, a couple good friends actually. And it's so scary to share for the first time, but these were people that have known us a long time, that we trust. And for some of them, it was like answering these questions that they had. They saw stuff in us and it didn't quite make sense, and this was like, oh, that's why. That makes so much sense. For others, it just made them really curious and wanting to know more about us, and they asked great questions, and everybody was really accepting of it. There was no harsh criticism, nothing. Like, they just showered us with love and support, and it was amazing. So then we listened to one of those podcast episodes where it talks about, and I may not get this quite right, but close enough, a gathering of people who have DID or are multiples, where it was obvious that two of them were talking like old friends. So they asked them if they already knew each other, and they shared that they'd worked together for a really long time, like 20 years or something, and neither of them knew the other had DID, because that's how hard we work at hiding it. especially in the workforce. That was really powerful for me and made me really think about why I worked so hard to hide the DID at work. And I had a really good relationship with my clinical supervisor. I do have a really good relationship with her, and I trust her, and I decided I wanted to share with her. And so we did, and she was amazing about it. It's the first time we've ever shared in any kind of occupational setting, and it was a really powerful experience for us that somebody that we respect professionally can know that we have DID and still believe that we are good at our job, and that, we can, it didn't change the way she looked at us. It was so powerful for us. And we decided to share with other people at work kind of over time. And at this point, I think everybody that we work closely with, who we trust, knows. And everybody's been really accepting, really gracious. It's been amazing to be able to share and, be vulnerable, just show up and like, this is who we are, and have people happy to know us better and to support us. And when we are struggling, typically it doesn't show up at work, but sometimes it does. And if we are struggling, to be able to like say to our boss, like, we're feeling really switchy, so we're gonna head home because we shouldn't be here right now. I'm not sure that the ones responsible for work can stay in control, so we're just gonna head out early today, rather than having to like lie and say like we have a migraine and we have to go home, but just to be open and honest about it. And that's been a great experience, and people are so supportive, and that helps us to challenge our own beliefs that like, because we have DID, we're not good enough, because they still think we're good enough. So it helps us challenge our own kind of false beliefs. More recently, at home, as I said, I have 2 boys. My oldest is 12, and we had this experience where we as a system were having a rough weekend, and there was a lot of switching happening, and we were just struggling, and it was obvious. We stayed in bed a lot. You could tell we were struggling, and my son, not having the DID kind of context to understand it in, was getting worried that we were experiencing suicidality again, because we talked very openly with him about that struggle and mental health, and wanting him to know that it's okay to talk about these things and it's okay to get help. Like, he's ridden with me countless times when we go to therapy. He knows we go to therapy twice a week. We just want to normalize that for him. So after his little brother goes to bed, he asks if we can talk, and so we go out in the living room, and he asks us, if we're okay. And in that moment, it just felt like the right time to be honest with him. And so we were able to tell him, it's not suicidality, it's actually this, and to describe it in an appropriate way without getting into the details of why this disorder developed with us or any of the past trauma. Like, set that boundary that we're not going to talk about that because it's not appropriate, but this is our experience now, and this is what's going on. And for him, it was like relief to understand, and he could look back and be like, so when this happened, was it because an alter was out? And like, yes. And the alters who wanted, they were all kind of talking to me. The ones who wanted him to know about them, I could share their name and describe who they are and why they might react differently than I do, as he's most familiar with me. So it's been a really great experience, and he was so accepting of it. Of course, he hasn't been exposed to any of the stigma or the way it's portrayed in movies or any of that, so he could just bypass all of that, and he was able to accept it, and he actually thinks it's pretty cool. You can tell sometimes if a younger alter, if we're playing and a younger alter comes out and is playing with him, he knows that a switch has happened, and he mostly just feels proud that he can tell when it's happened. But he has no anxiety around it. He's really okay with it. Although we did make sure that he knew it was fine to talk to his counselor at school about it, and he did, and the 3 of us ended up meeting, and she's great. We had a really good discussion about it, just in case something does happen at some point, wanting him to have support. So we did that, and then we actually later decided that we wanted one of his teachers to know as well. So I met with his teacher and shared, and then the three of us met and talked about what might be helpful for our son. And it's been really, really good. Even more recently, my youngest and I were alone in the car. He's 7, and we're driving down the road, and he asks if when we get home, can I be the fun mom today? And just kind of casually asked him what he meant, and he was like, you know how sometimes you're the fun mom, you're super goofy and like to play games, and sometimes you're a really serious mom and you just want to get stuff done, and sometimes you're a really quiet mom and you don't really talk, and can you just be the fun mom today? And so I think our youngest, even though he doesn't have the words for DID, can really see when different alters are out and how that changes our presentation, which, even a year ago would have been terrifying to be seen in that way, and to realize that our covert system is not so covert and that people can tell. But we've come so far that it was just this humorous thing that happened. Like, he can totally see us, and even though we're not talking to him yet about the DID, I think whenever we do, he will just be like, well, obviously, like, he sees it. So that's been interesting. We're still learning as a system to really accept who we are and where we are on this journey, and constantly trying to find ways to decrease the shame. And sharing with other people is one of the most powerful experiences we've had, as well as just being so vulnerable in therapy and not holding back. Now we regularly have alters fronting and talking directly to our therapist instead of kind of through me, which is how we did it for a very long time, but they just want to talk to them directly, and I'd rather just back up and let them, so I don't have to play this kind of middleman role. And I think it's helping a lot. I mean, for example, our suicidality is almost non-existent. We went from wanting to die pretty much all day, every day for years, to maybe these fleeting moments where things feel too hard and we think about death. But it doesn't last long, and it's pretty rare now. Maybe, I don't know, a couple times a month is where we're at right now. For the most part, things are really good, and when they're not, the focus isn't we need to die, it's who is struggling and what do they need to feel safe and to settle things down, which has really been quite amazing. And we wanted to kind of share, because even though we're not done yet, there's still a lot of work to do. We're still processing and working towards a really kind of cohesive system, so there isn't any distress by there being multiples inside. So even though we're not there yet, like, we've come so far, and we don't live in this like overwhelming shame anymore. We've reached a certain level of acceptance that we are multiple, and that's okay. Like, we needed that years ago. We couldn't have survived without it, and I'm grateful that our system developed the way it did. And we're just working on things internally so that our system runs a little more smoothly, and there isn't the kind of the 8 arbitrary number 8 parts trying to get through, one doorway being our mouth, so that we can't talk at all. That's not happening so much anymore. We can work together to kind of express what needs to be expressed, and it's not always perfect. We still have times where we struggle, for sure, but we've come so far, and just the decrease in suicidality alone is really a significant marker of our progress. So when we heard about this conference on the podcast, actually, and they talked about it, we thought that was so cool. So we went online to kind of get some more information. When's the next one? Would love to watch. And they were looking for speakers on the website, and had a moment of like, that would be pretty cool to kind of share our story. If it could help other people the way the podcasts and these books we've read have helped us to not feel alone in this, that would be amazing. But it also is, we've never talked publicly, so it's scary, and how much do we really want to put ourselves out there? And so we just kind of left it and went to bed. The next morning when we woke up, I see an email thanking us for our application. So it's a little funny because I'm not the one that did the application, but somebody internally felt strongly that we should do this. And I think I probably would have gotten there myself, given a little bit more time and thinking about it a little more thoroughly. But somebody knew that this is something we should do. And I agree. When we got the email accepting our application, we just immediately started thinking about what we want to say and what we want to share. No second thoughts about doing it. Like, I think this is a great opportunity to kind of share and hopefully to give some hope, especially to people who are newly diagnosed that are still in that like shock and the fear, or maybe in the denial. And for those who are just living with so much shame, it's hard to be in that space. We were there for a long time. We understand. And just want to convey some hope that it doesn't have to stay like that. You know, keep trying, keep moving forward, keep showing up to therapy. If you don't have a therapist, find a good one. There are some amazing therapists out there. If you have safe people in your life, like, dare to be vulnerable with them and just share, you know, a little bit of your story, a little bit of your experience now, whatever it is that you feel safe sharing. Like, it's hard not to assume that people are going to reject you, or think that you're crazy, or that you're too much, or that you're lying. But if there are people in your life who you've known for a long time and they've shown over time that they're trustworthy, you know, take that risk, because it is powerful when you can share with people and they just believe you and they support you. And then when you are struggling, or there's things happening internally, to be able to talk openly with people in your life about what's going on, there's so much relief in that. Truly so much relief. And if you have internally, if you don't have that kind of communication and things still feel chaotic and overwhelming, keep trying to find a way to increase the communication and to get to know your alters. It is like a game changer once you have like a relationship with them and can talk with them. There are times where I can just kind of watch what's happening inside and the way everybody works together to get us through certain things. It's kind of a beautiful thing. It's amazing that we have the ability to coordinate, to talk to each other, to work towards the same goal. You know, it's not always that easy, but as long as you don't give up and you keep working at it, things do get better, things get easier. And there's times now where we feel genuinely at peace. Things are okay. Things are going to be okay. Like, we are truly safe now, and we still have a lot of trauma to work through, and we still have some work to do in our system so that it's everything's just a little smoother and things aren't so hard sometimes. But, you know, just don't give up. Keep showing up. It will get better. And, you know, seek out support wherever you can, whether it's therapy, there's, you know, online support groups. We do a really great one, online kind of live support group with others who have DID. And there's something so great about being able to talk about, you know, even the most basic things, like having a really switchy day where there's lots of switches happening and ending up with that kind of switchy headache, and having people like nod because they truly understand what you're talking about. Like, just even the little pieces, and just like to feel seen and understood and to know that you're not alone. Like, find that wherever you can. There's some great podcasts out there. I know there's some really good YouTube channels out there. We've seen some, watched some. YouTube isn't really our thing. We're more of a podcast person, so we've listened to that a lot more. But find whatever works for you. And find a way to feel connected to others who are struggling in the same way, because it really helps to decrease the shame. You know, that you're so messed up. You're not. You were hurt and you're struggling to recover from it. And there's others in that same boat. And I can speak for myself that I'm happy to talk to anybody who's struggling with having other people inside, and how hard that is, because I get it. It's hard sometimes. It is so hard sometimes, but it also can be amazing and beautiful, and a good thing. So just keep going, keep showing up, keep trying to make things better, and find a way to connect with others. And yeah, I hope that hearing our story is helpful. There was about 5 different alters who were sharing with me things that they wanted to add. So I tried to do that as seamlessly as I could. If it seems a little choppy, I apologize about that. But wanting to share everything that everybody wants to be shared, because it's not just my story, it's our story. And even though we decided I was going to share it, want to make sure that they're involved, and everything they want shared is being shared. So and this is a first for us. We aren't professional speakers, so hopefully that was okay. And I'm just thankful for this opportunity to share with you guys, and I hope it was helpful for somebody out there who's struggling. It gives you just a little bit of hope. Thanks.